Hey guys, MetalJesus here. Now I'm sure many of you've heard that on July 29th, 2024, Microsoft is going to permanently shut down the Xbox 360 Marketplace and digital store. And that is such a bummer for many of us who loved playing games on our Xbox 360, but I guess all good things must come to pass. And so that's why I'm doing this video, because I'm going to be recommending that you check out some of these games that I think are pretty fun and are worth preserving. But before we get to that list, I do want to mention a couple things. And the first one being, a lot of people, myself included, are kind of concerned that the price of Xbox 360 games are starting to rise. And that is mostly due to physical games and people trying to collect them because they're getting very nostalgic for them, right? Well, in this video, I'm mostly talking about digital games, and so the prices should not really be an issue here because they're set by Microsoft and the publisher, and really only one of the games I'm going to talk about had a physical release. And honestly, as we get close to that date where the store closes, I would love to see Microsoft and developers do a massive fire sale. Drop all these down to like a couple bucks just to get them on people's consoles. I think that would be a very cool move by Microsoft as sort of a thank you to the community. The other thing I want to mention is that about half of these games are playable on the Xbox One and series of consoles through backwards compatibility. There's a really easy way to tell because when you look at the Xbox 360 Marketplace, at the bottom on each one of these, it'll say whether it works on Xbox One. And so keep that in mind if you don't intend to play these on your Xbox 360, but you really want to preserve them, to be played on your newer consoles. That's pretty cool. Now, some of these are available on PC and also the PlayStation 3 network, but again, for how long? We just don't know, right? It's hard to trust them. So just keep that in mind as we go through this list, and I'll try to label them as well. With all that said, let's get started. The first game I want to talk about is called Gatling Gears. This is a really great top-down twin-stick shooter that was first released on Xbox Live Arcade, but then later they brought it over to the PlayStation Network and also PC. This is my kind of game. It feels kind of like a mix of Mech Assault, if you play that on the Xbox, and also a bullet hell style shooter. You have three different types of weapons. You've got a gun, you got some rockets, and you've got missiles, plus you also get special power-ups. Plus there are upgrades at the beginning of each level. There's like a store that you approach and you can buy upgrades. And as you see by this footage, there are lots of things to shoot at and, well, lots of things explode. It's glorious. Also, the 3D graphics are pretty good. Again, this is a digital-only game, and I assume it's like an indie title, but as you see here, it's pretty high quality. Now, I would say that this game does get a little monotonous. As I mentioned, it is a twin-stick shooter, and you're going to do a lot of shooting, but the difficulty keeps you coming back time and time again. I like this game a lot. All right, we're going to talk about Guardian Heroes. So this was originally a Sega Saturn exclusive game, but then the Xbox 360 got an HD exclusive version back in 2011. And as you can see here, it's really just a beat 'em up, but it has this really cool feature where there are planes that you can kind of jump between in the foreground and background. So as you battle enemies in the background, then you can bump up to the foreground and, maybe destroy some barrels, get some health, things like that. It's a beloved game on the Sega Saturn and probably didn't get as big of an audience as it should have. And so I was really happy to see that the 360 got this enhanced HD version. And what they did is that they modified the game to support 16:9 widescreens, but it also has the option to go between the original pixel art and these kind of new HD graphics. So you'll notice that the original graphics are, that very traditional pixel art style. They're very clean. They're very retro. But then you can play the game in these new graphics. They're kind of, I guess, cartoony looking. They almost look like they're artificially smooth with maybe a little bit of shading added. It doesn't look completely redrawn, but, it doesn't look really bad either. I don't know. I guess it's nice that they at least give you a choice as to which one you want to prefer. They also modified the gameplay a bit if you want. They call it Remix Mode, and it's selectable off of the main menu, and that changes up the controls a bit as well as the gameplay mechanics. So like how dodging and air dashing works. Again, maybe more attuned to a modern audience. They also updated the story a little bit as well as some of the dialogue. So this is definitely a classic beat 'em up for a reason, and like I said, it's really nice to see it featured here on the Xbox 360. All right, next up, I'm very excited to talk about this game and curious if you played it. It is called Fusion Genesis. This is an indie game that was created by former Rare employees, and the ambition of this game is impressive. At first glance, this probably looks like your typical twin-stick shooter, but instead, it's actually an epic-sized action RPG in space. And don't let that description fool you because, like I said, this is just a huge RPG. It's got a full story. There are 5 separate factions that you can join and also pit against each other, as well as 6 main storylines. This is, like I said, just sprawling in scale. You start off this game with no affiliations to any of those factions, but you can join any of them at any time. And what's cool is that each one of these has their own moral code, their own agenda, as well as ships, their own special missions that you can take on. And so they all play a little bit different too. So when you go and you look at the ships that are part of a faction, some of them might be designed more for stealth or speed. Some of them might be more heavily armored or have the ability to carry more ammunition or more weapons. And you upgrade your character as you play. So here you see some skills that I've unlocked. You have points that you can put in base skills, as well as some that are specific to different factions. So you can really tailor the game to how you want to play. It's completely customizable up to you, and you will want to join those different factions because you'll start one and maybe you play through about 10 or 15 missions or so, then you want to go try another one, and then all of a sudden there's a completely different area of space that opens up. Again, I can't stress this enough, it's just absolutely huge. Now, the one criticism I would have of this is that there is a bit of level grinding here and padding out of the gameplay. So much so that it might turn off some players, especially after a few hours. But again, I found the ability to join those other factions at any point basically completely changed the game up as I was starting to get a little bit bored with one faction. And as you go along, you realize that the storylines do start to intersect. So yeah, it's super cool. So if you're looking for a sprawling action RPG in space, definitely check out Fusion Genesis.
Oh yes, by all means take your time. There's no rush. Other than battleships laden with fascists and extremists. Oh, you found the first power cell. I see that simple directions are not beyond your clearly formidable intellect.
Next up is a game I think many of you are going to be familiar with. That, of course, is Trials HD. It's probably one of the more, I would say, well-known or recognized or probably popular games on this list, but I wanted to mention it because I do think this is a fantastic game. So what's going on here? Well, as the name suggests, this is a motorcycle trials game that, again, has had a few sequels, but it's this classic original that I personally keep coming back to time and time again. Now, I mentioned that one game in this video had a physical release, and this is one of them. I'm pretty sure this is the only one. This got a physical release on the 360 because it was part of a compilation that Microsoft put out. They used to do that a lot back in the day. Kind of wish they did that today, actually. But yeah, Trials HD is the one that you can get a physical version of, which I really like. Now, if you haven't played these games before, well, they are very physics-based. You can't just mash the gas and hope to jump your way through these levels, that's not going to work. I mean, that works kind of in the beginning, but as you go forward, there is a lot of strategy going on here. So what you end up doing is taking your time and being very careful as you go through these challenges to get to the end. And oh, by the way, they're timed. So you want to get the best time as possible. You want to do it as quickly as possible, but you can't just blaze through them. It's pretty fun. What I like about the series is that they throw some really tricky parts at you here. They actually are very creative in their level design because, like, as you see here, you're required to fall down a hole, and that then leads to a big jump, and then you have to subtly climb some rocks. It throws a lot at you. This is a classic game for a reason, and I think it's definitely worth owning. Next up is a trilogy of games I'm very excited to talk about. That is the Alien Breed trilogy. I'm going to highlight the third game here, but really you could download and play any of them on the 360 and I think you'd be happy. I just chose the third one because I think it's the most well-rounded and probably the most fun in my opinion, but again, there's no bad in this trilogy at all. This was made by the developers Team 17, and they made the popular Worm series. This also came out on the PlayStation 3 and the PC, by the way, and it's based on a classic 1980s arcade game that, you know, I remember playing back in the day. It's awesome. Now, while the original was a top-down game, this one, as you see here, obviously is a full-blown 3D remake, and I think it's better for it. It's an isometric shooter that has a really great pick-up-and-play kind of gameplay, and the graphics, I think, look really good. I mean, in many ways, it plays like a double or triple A game. At times, this game gave me a genuine feeling of dread and suspense, especially in some of those dark, tight corridors where you're not exactly sure where the aliens are going to pop out and just cut you down. So yeah, this is definitely a very intense game. They did a fantastic job here. Check out Alien Breed, the trilogy, 1, 2, or 3. If you don't have time for all of them, just pick up the third one. There is a bit of story there, but, you know, you don't have to worry about it. You'll figure it out. Next up, oh yeah, I love this game, Splosion Man. So this is quite possibly the best reviewed game in this video. When this came out, it was getting tons of accolades, great reviews, and essentially it's a direct sequel to another game that's really great, which was Splosion Man. So I just chose the sequel here, Splosion Man, because I do think it's a little bit better. The premise here is that you are made of an explosive material that every time you push that jump button, you explode, which then damages the environment, kills enemies, and then also you use it to solve puzzles. It's a pretty clever premise with some rock-solid controls. As you see on the screen here, it's got some great graphics and just the perfect amount of challenge. There is something that is kind of funny that this game does. I don't want to complain about it, but I also want to point it out that it's kind of sneaky. And you see it here. So there's a section where you're trying to jump from one of these flying cars to the other. And you have to be very precise about that. But the game keeps putting objects in front of you. And also there's so much going on the screen that sometimes it is a little bit like hard to get through this. But, you know, I have a huge smile on my face when I'm playing this. And honestly, you know, the checkpoints are pretty generous. So it doesn't take you too far back if you do have to start over. Oh yeah, and this has some pretty epic boss battles too. So yeah, definitely really cool game. If you haven't played it before, you're just gonna love this. Splosion Man.
Here we go. No escape.
Speaking of blowing some stuff up, we're going to keep that ball rolling with a game called Thunderwolves. As you can see by this footage, it is a helicopter arcade game, and what's great about it is that the controls are very easy to understand. They're not too complicated. That's one of the things about helicopter games, that sometimes they can be a little unwieldy, especially to people who are maybe new to the genre. You're not going to have a problem here. You're going to be able to jump right in. It's definitely an arcade game and just have some fun. And as you see by the footage here, things blow up real good. The other thing I like about this too is that the mission objectives are varied. I mean, they keep it interesting. The environments change quite a bit. So sometimes you're on the surface, sometimes you'll be going through caves. It's nice that they do that. I like how even occasionally it turns into an on-rail shooter to, again, break up that gameplay. So you're gunning people down, you know, while someone else is piloting the helicopter itself. So yeah, definitely a very fun game. It does have a difficulty setting. So again, if you're kind of, you know, maybe a little apprehensive with a game like this, maybe you don't play a lot of flight sims or whatever, don't worry about it, because you can put this on easy and pretty much just anybody can have fun doing it. All right, we're going to continue mixing it up here, and this is the Misadventures of P.B. Winterbottom. So this is a pure puzzle platforming game that is often compared to games, say, like Portal or also Braid. You play as this big-nosed guy who is obsessed with eating as many pies as possible. It's kind of a weird premise. It's sort of silly, but really the point is just that's what you need to collect throughout the levels to complete them, is get to the pies. This is a puzzle game that uses time to solve them. Specifically, what you do in this game is you create a clone of yourself doing an action, and then you might create another clone doing another action, and then you interact with those clones to then help you get to each of the pies. Does that make sense? It's a pretty interesting little premise here. I can see why they definitely compare it to Braid, and it requires a little bit of brain power to kind of figure it all out. Every level is a lot of kind of like trial and error, you know, especially with the clones and getting them to do something that then you react with. But trust me, you'll figure it out. And as you see here, it's got a great art style. So if you like games that make you think and maybe sometimes stump you, well, this is going to be right up your alley. Oh yeah, baby, we're back to another game I'm so excited to talk about. That is Mad Riders. This is a super fast arcade racing game. Now, this also came out on the PlayStation 3 and the PC, and it was developed by Techland. So that is a name that is probably somewhat familiar to you. That's because they developed more recently Dying Light, Dead Island, and just a bunch of great arcade racing games, like another one that maybe you played, maybe you didn't, called Nailed. In fact, this game is very similar to Nailed, but I feel like I kind of want to talk about this one because Nailed did get a physical release. It's a great game. It's usually not very expensive. I highly recommend you get it. But Mad Riders is, I believe, a game that came out after that. And so they tweaked it a little bit to make this digital-only version of it. And as you can see by this footage, man, you just have an incredible sense of speed. I love games like this where they have the speed, but they've also got the really tight controls, right? Because that's key. You can throw a lot of speed at you, but then you have to make it so that you feel like you can actually win. And in this game, you definitely do. There's also a really cool trick system in here. It's not too complex. Pretty much everyone should be able to get into it. And when you do that, then you're going to get boost, which makes the game even faster. So, woohoo! It's a fantastic arcade racing game, as you can tell by my voice. I do love it. So definitely check out either Mad Riders or get the physical version of Nailed. You won't regret it. This is Night into Dreams. This was also a really big Sega Saturn exclusive back in the day. that then got an HD remastered version, remix, whatever you want to call it here, on the Xbox 360, which is awesome. Now, it's my understanding that this game was made by the same team that also made Sonic the Hedgehog back on the Sega Genesis, but this is a fresh take on that platforming game. In this game, you can play as 2 different characters, and you choose basically to play either during the day or the night. And the idea of the game was to try to give the player the sense of flying through the air, which is a very different thing than Sonic the Hedgehog, right? He was just running really fast on the ground, but here they want to give you the sense of flying. And I would say they've done a pretty good job with that, because it uses those analog controls, because you're kind of like zooming around almost like a dream. It's really cool. This version lets you play the original Saturn version if you prefer that, or you can play the game in widescreen HD. Even today, I would say Nights into Dreams is a very unique experience, and so if you haven't played it and you have an Xbox 360, you should check it out. Here's another game I'm very excited to talk about. It is Scrap Metal. I remember when I first downloaded this years ago, loved it from the very beginning. It's a great arcade racing / combat game. To understand what's going on here, think Twisted Metal with an overview or isometric view to it. But as you see here, they're all fully 3D models and levels, and you have really great physics and also effects. And isometric games are really interesting because I don't love all of them. I think it's because you can't always see the entire level, right? And so it can be really frustrating if a turn comes up too quickly and you can't anticipate it in time. Or maybe sometimes the controls don't feel very good. You know, it can be kind of frustrating. But I found that this game is not frustrating at all. The driving feels great. You're zoomed out enough on the levels that it doesn't get frustrating. You kind of know where to go. You can anticipate where to go. And combat is really fun. It's not even optional. You need to do combat in this game, and it's just that extra level. Again, kind of like Twisted Metal, right? Where you're just blowing everything up, blowing up your fellow racers. It's so cool. What I like too is that it's not always about just getting to the finish line before everyone else, you know, trying to complete as many laps as everyone. Sometimes you actually have to destroy a target car within those certain number of laps, or you'll lose. So it, again, definitely mixes it up. All right, guys, there you go. That is 11 games that I think you should at least check out before the Xbox 360 marketplace and store is taken down forever. It'll be a sad day. We'll have to pour one out when that happens. But the good news is that the games on this list that will run on the Xbox One and the Xbox series of consoles, Microsoft has said that you'll be able to buy those games on those systems and play them in compatibility mode. So the good news is that, you know, for a lot of these games, you don't necessarily have to run out today to do that. If they do a sale, if they do like a fire sale, I think you probably should, because you could get a really good deal on these. But that's at least something, right? But like I said, this is only 11 games out of potentially hundreds of games that you might want to check out. And so I'd be curious to know down in the comments if there are other games you think that people should check out, myself included. There's so many in there. I'm sure I missed a few. So let me know down in the comments what other games you think that we should check out before that store closes. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.